Hey guys, sorry about that little break there. I actually ran out of memory in my camera, so I had to go and delete a whole bunch of old stuff and get back. So let's jump right back into this. So the next question also comes from Broberlish Code, and he says, in your Solomonic 101 course, you mentioned something along the lines that when we build and start our altar, we get a spark of that deity that now resides there in its new home. I'm assuming it would be kind of like a child that will cultivate over time. Would it make sense to offer candles and other offerings to yours or other established worship sites dedicated to that deity to help empower and grow our personal home altars? Now, to elaborate a little on what he's asking, he mentioned that when you set up an altar, and we're talking about, the altar having, it might have an icon, like a statue, an image, a talisman, or in some cases, it might just be the altar itself. But this physical representation of the entity that you're working with, angel, deity, spirit, what have you, this becomes a physical body for the entity that you're working with. And when you invoke this entity and you invoke it often at this place, at this altar, into this image or into this physical body, this is very akin to you having begun as a spiritual entity and then being born into a human body. And even if your spirit is thousands of years old, you're still starting over. You're still starting as an infant. You have to grow. You have to learn. And so that's why he's very spot on when he says that he imagines it's like a child, because it is. A very good analog to this in Santeria. If you go into a Santero's home, he'll have all of these pots, beautifully decorated. I mean, just gorgeous altars all over the place. And the pots have sacred things in them that you're not allowed to see. But those pots are the homes. Those are the physical bodies for the Orisha. But he didn't just, go to a store and buy the pot and now he has the Orisha there. No, he has to have, his godfather has to come over with his pots, or vice versa. I'm actually not sure how they do it as far as that goes. But one way or the other, the new pot has to come into contact with the old pot, his godfather's pot, his teacher's pot. So if his teacher has, let's say, Shango, and his godson or daughter is also going to have Shango, the younger Shango, the student's Shango, has to be born into the new pot from the pot of his godparent. And this creates a line of succession going all the way back to ancient Africa. And it's very much the same what we do in our traditions, that when we bring a spirit into the physical plane and give them a physical body, such as an altar or an image or a talisman, we are linking them to our world. And that allows them to work in our world and do things for us. But they don't come through as already just completely powerful, and can do anything. It takes them time, and they have to grow, and you have to train them. And likewise, they have to train you. And little by little, you build this relationship, and each of you grow. And then after a few years, you and it have become powerful, and you can work together and actually get things done. This is the main reason why I'm very against this, this formula that a lot of people try to use where, I need this, so I'm going to look through this list of spirits and find a spirit that can bring that. I'm going to summon it, demand what I want from it, and then send it away and hope that what I ask for actually comes through. That can work, but it's not the traditional, the ancient way of working. It's not very powerful. If you have the spirit living in your home and you've worked with it over months and years and built it up, now you've got something of power that can go out and bring you the things that you need. Now, the point he made about the spark is that, let's take, for example, Raphael. You guys, there's a video that I posted earlier about, that showed me working at Raphael's altar. And I explained how that altar was set up. So that altar is Raphael's home. But I don't have the entirety of the Archangel Raphael living here in my temple, so that none of the rest of you are allowed to work with Raphael. Because, hey, I guess I just got him this life. Sucks to be you, right? Wrong. What I got was a spark. The same thing as where the Orisha births a new version of itself into the new pot in Santeria. The same thing has happened here. I have called down Raphael, but I've got just a little spark of him. One ray of Raphael shines down. The greater universal Raphael is still out there. And he's beyond my control. He's beyond my comprehension. But I got this little child of Raphael. You could even think of it as a servitor of Raphael that Raphael dispatches to me. But however you want to look at it, I've just got a little piece of the big guy. And then that little piece is small. And he starts out weak, and he starts out disoriented, just like a baby. And little by little, I feed him, and I work with him, and I empower him, and he also empowers me. And little by little, we grow and we learn together. Excuse me, until we have something very powerful. And now I can send Raphael out to do things on my behalf or on behalf of my clients and such. So that's what he's describing, and he's spot on when he describes it as being like a child who has to grow. So that's a very important secret of magic. Now, as for his question, it's kind of there's kind of two parts here. He was asking if, like, he could have me perform rituals. Let's say we're going to stick with the Raphael example. So let's say he's wanting to work with Raphael, and he's built his own altar to Raphael. And he wants to know if I could perform offerings here that would empower him. The answer is yes, but I'm not saying it would hurt anything. You could definitely do it. In fact, I've had people have me make offerings to like do candle offerings, for example, to an archangel that they're planning to work with. It would be a boost. It would help. But it's not going to do that much for your altar. It would do a lot more if you could come here and make offerings at this altar. But I think the best way, again, to describe this is I'm going to have to refer to the like Santeria once again. Again, my teacher was Oshani Lele, so I learned a lot from the Afro-Caribbean side of things. So I learned to look at things from that perspective. So I'm going to fall back on it here. They have, in Santeria, there's a thing called ashe. And here in the West, we would call it power, energy. But that's really kind of a misnomer, to be honest with you. It's not energy in the sense of electricity. It's energy in the sense that emotions are energy, that passions are energy. And ashe is that kind of energy, but associated with a particular force. So, again, with the Raphael example, as I invoke Raphael on this altar and I continually make these offerings to him and work with him and build him up and make him strong, I am building up ashe, building up energy of Mercury, of healing, of that particular archangel. So my altar to Raphael, after years of working with it, is going to have more of that ashe, more of that power than yours will when you've just set it up and started working with it. So it does make sense that you would ask, could I work here and use my ashe to help his altar? And again, I'll say, well, yeah, but I think it's kind of missing the point to have me do it. If you could come here and make the offerings, you would carry something home with you. You would carry some of that ashe home with you. I know it would be more powerful. But he also mentioned, and this is the real crux of his question, I think, he said, or other places that are sacred to that force. Rather than coming to me or my altars, that's what you should be doing. If you're going to work with Raphael, you should go to hospitals and leave offerings on the grounds of hospitals and say prayers while you're at the hospitals. Or to libraries, because Mercury, again, we're sticking with Raphael, but, Raphael would be in charge of libraries and universities, schools, places of learning. You could go to those places. Let's say you're working with Anael of Venus. You could go to a brothel and leave a offerings there. You could go to an art. You could go to a museum or an art museum, places where artists are showcasing their work, and leave offerings on the grounds there. You could go to theaters and places where the arts are practiced, where there are actors and singers, where there are people who are beautiful and who bank on being beautiful people and that kind of thing. So you see what I'm saying? So that it's different kinds of ashe depending on which entity. Let's say you're working with Samael. You could go to war memorials. You could go to your local military base. Of course, you couldn't go onto the base, but you could go near it and leave offerings. So these are just different ways of focusing in on the particular force that you're trying to work with. And, you don't want someone else to do it. You need to go do it. And this is, again, you're going to be taking that little spark, that smaller version of the bigger entity, that child, with you when you do that. And they will hear you, and they will be empowered by it. And then you go home, and this puts more ashe, more energy, more power into your altar. And you will slowly, over time, build that up. So, yeah, that is definitely a very good idea. I believe I even talk about it in my book, Secrets of the Grimoires, about going to... Oh, no, I don't. It's not Secrets of the Grimoires. It's the book Ritual Offerings, which you can get from Nephilim Press. Or if you want to get the hardbound version, you can still get that from the Doc Solomon store. And I talk about going to different places that are associated with the force that you're working with, or the entity or deity that you're working with, and leaving offerings and even like taking a stone from one of those places, for example, and bringing it back to the altar. Or there's a lot of things you can do to connect your work with those places of power. So it's a very good idea to do that. But I think just calling me up and paying me to do it for you, again, it wouldn't hurt. It would probably help, but it's not really what you're after. It's your relationship with your version of, for example, Raphael, or your version of Michael or Aniel or Samael, because they are the ones you want to empower rather than mine. Excuse me. I should have brought some water with me. Well, let's go on to the next question. Mike says, my question is, due to lack of space, can the 7 archangels share space on something like a table with a corresponding colored runner to divide their spaces? Actually, yeah, you can do that. I have several students in my Solomonic class who have done that. They'll just get a long table, and they've got all 7 archangels arrayed on it. The one thing I want to warn you about doing that, though, is, and this again is about building that relationship and getting to know them. Number one, understand the mythology, the midrashim, the legends that are associated with those entities. You want to know which entities get along with each other, which entities are opposed to each other and tend to fight with one another. You want to know, for example, Michael. The Archangel Michael is the general of the heavenly armies. He is the high priest of the heavenly temple. He sits at the right hand of God. So if you're going to set up a table with all of these angels on it, you're probably going to want to put Michael a little higher, like put something under him, a dais of some sort, so he will be above his troops. He's not going to be happy if you put him below them. And so the height that you put them at can matter. The who you put next to each other can matter. And it's not always a bad thing. It's not always a negative relationship that can be an issue. For example, we learned here through our work that Aniel, the Archangel of Venus, and Samael, the Archangel of Mars, have a real thing for each other, if you know what I'm talking about. And after we learned that, just by working with them, we found out, we had not known previously, that in the ancient Greek mythos, Ares and Aphrodite, or in Rome, that's Venus and Mars, they were actually lovers. They had a thing with each other. And as this progresses through time, you'll find that legends of, say, Samael and Lilith is a very Venusian entity. They also are considered husband and wife. They're considered lovers. And this also kind of translates into the Christian tradition, where Lucifer and Lilith are said to be lovers. So this is a thread that has run through history. And we just happen to tap into that. Fortunately, we understood it. I should say, we were awake enough to see it and realize, hey, there's something going on between these two. So if we were to put, or not, I won't even give you for instance. I'll just tell you what we actually did. We make sure that Samael and Anael, and again, this is Venus and Mars, are in two separate rooms. Because if we were to put them together side by side, the energy that they would produce would just be like setting the house on fire. It would be too much. It would be all the time, and it would just it would burn out. So we keep them in separate rooms, and then on special occasions when we're doing specific different types of workings, we'll actually bring them together. There are times when we work with Samael, and we'll say, as part of the offering to Samael, we'll say, hey, we need this done, and if you'll do this for us, we'll bring an image, a magical object. It might be a talisman, it might be a figure, but we'll bring something from Anael's altar to Samael's altar, and we'll say, hey, we'll bring Anael to you and let you guys, have some fun for a while you're doing this for us. So that's kind of part of the offering. It's part of what he gets in payment for working. And it can work the other way. We can tell Anael, hey, if you'll get this for us, if you'll do this for us, whatever it happens to be, we'll bring an image of Samael into your altar and let you guys spend time together. So knowing their mythology, this is why knowing their mythology is so important. If you don't know these things, you'll stumble on them blindly, and like if we hadn't really realized what was going on and we left them close together, it could have actually produced way more fiery energy than is good for us. I mean, our house could have burned down, or machinery could have started failing, or even just ourselves. We could have found ourselves tired and leached out and just burned out all the time, just from the power of these angels just sucking everything up around them through their own lovemaking. So, it's just one example of why knowing who they are, their personalities, their mythologies, their legends, really has a massive impact on how you interact with them in a practical sense. And this goes for all the angels. You might not want to put Michael and Samael right next to each other on the same level, because Michael and Samael traditionally really like to fight each other. That's what the book of Revelation is. Michael and the seven-headed dragon was Samael, and Michael came down in the book of Revelation and had this great war in the heavens. No, they're not always hostile toward each other, but they can be. So we make sure that they're actually in our living room on two separate sides facing separate directions of a fireplace. So they're both over the fireplace, but there are two separate mantles, one facing one room and one facing the other. Michael, and again, this is knowing Michael, knowing his mythology, knowing that he's a guardian angel, he's a protector, a soldier. He faces the door. He always wants to face the front door so he can watch it and protect us. But Samael, we were more concerned with him, that we wanted him where the fire was, where the heat was. So, all of this comes into play. Yes, you can put them all on a table together. Just keep in mind who they are and arrange them in a way that is most beneficial to them and you. And you'll figure that out, not just by reading the legends and understanding their personalities, but working with them personally. Because again, your Raphael, my Raphael are two separate entities. Your Michael and my Michael are two separate entities. And they learn and they grow and they develop different skills. So how your angels or deities or spirits will interact with each other will also depend on you and how you've worked with them and what their own individual personalities happen to be. So keep all that in mind. We're getting close to the end here, so let's go on with a question from Michael. He says, my main question is with regards to setting up altars for the planetary spirits. Can I do more than one? Well, the answer to that obviously is yes. We have an altar here for each of the 7 planetary archangels. Each one is in a room of the house that is associated with that planetary force. For example, Gabriel is at our front door where he is overlooking the sacred garden outside, because Gabriel is the angel who makes the fruits blossom and the plants grow. That's his midrashim, that's his legend. So he is in charge of our garden, so he's out there. I've already said that Michael Not only is he over a fireplace because he's the angel of the sun and of fire, but he also guards the front door, so he's facing the front door. And also traditionally, um, the solar altars should be in the living room, which is where he is. He's overlooking the living room, and he wants to be where solar entities want to be where the life of the house is, and where you're doing your day to day thing, and they just like to see that families being families, or even if you don't have a family, if it's just you living your life. That's what he wants to see. Samael, I've already said, is also over the fireplace, just facing the other side of the room. Um, but the point there is that he is over the fireplace where it's hot and where there's heat and ash. Um, but he can also be over the stove. He can also, and then there's also traditions where he can be in the bathroom. It's a little iffy for me, but they say that because Mars is in charge of, um, well, he's in charge of plague. He's in charge of things that break down. It's very similar to Saturn, actually, the things that are actually breaking down or rotting and being destroyed. So if you can have him in the bathroom where you eliminate waste, or you could have him near the garbage can where you throw things out that have to be taken out of the house. Again, I don't really like those as much as having him over the fireplace, but those are options. It has been talked about in traditional text. We have Raphael here is in the temple because he's in charge of magic. He's in charge of hermeticism. He's in charge of spells and sigils and talismans and all that stuff. So the temple is where he wants to be. Anael, the archangel of Venus, is in our bedroom because the bedroom, that's where she rules, and she rules love and passion and that kind of thing. And on top of that, the central part of her altar is a giant mirror. So this is also where my wife goes to apply her makeup and to primp and to make herself beautiful because that's what Anael is in charge of. Who am I missing? We got our Jupiter altar, where both the archangel Sakiel, who's one and the same with Zadkiel, it's just kind of a different pronunciation, and the angel Yophiel, they both live. They're also in our living room, but they are on a very high book. They're on the very top, actually, of a very tall bookshelf. Jupiter historically has always been worshipped in the high place. If you read the Bible, they would always go to the top of the highest mountain to build their altars. So any Jupiterian force is associated with high places. So if you could actually set a Jupiter altar up on your roof, that would be appropriate. Or in your attic, that would be appropriate. But of course, it's hard to get to in either of those places, in those cases. So I have them in my living room, but up on top of a bookshelf. So I actually have to bring a stool, a step stool over, or a chair or something, and climb up to that altar. And even still, I'm a little bit beneath it. I'm always kind of looking up at it in order to work with it. And that's very appropriate for Jupiter. And I believe the only one I've missed so far is Saturn. So our seventh is Saturn. That's the Archangel Cassiel. And he's back in, because he's Saturn, which is the furthest planet, the darkest planet, the slowest planet. So Cassiel is in the furthest room at the back of our house, inside a closet, inside a cupboard that we keep the doors closed to. So he is always in darkness. He's always in silence. He is undisturbed unless we need to come to him for something in particular. And then I'll open the cabinet and I'll work with him. And then when I'm done, I close that cabinet back and I let him go back to sleep because that's what Saturn wants. So it's actually called geomancy, but not geomancy with all the little dirt holes that you poke in the dirt. Not that kind of geomancy, but it's more like Chinese geomancy or geomancy, where you actually you take a blueprint of your house, the layout of your house, and you figure out which part of each of your house is governed by which astrological force, and then that's where you want to do the work for that. So yeah, we have all 7 of those altars throughout our house. So you can absolutely have more than one as long as you are willing to upkeep and maintain those altars on a regular basis. Don't just set up an altar and then forget about it because you're not building the relationship, you're not empowering the spirit. The spirit will just go to sleep and then it'll be kind of useless. And when you come back to it after months of having neglected it, you'll have to wake them up again and you're starting from scratch, or at least you're starting where you left off and you accomplish nothing in those months. So if you're going to set up an altar, have the personal responsibility to dedicate yourself to maintaining and working that altar. We're very lucky because we run Doc Solomon's and we do candle offerings at those altars on a regular basis for our clients. So while there are some angels who tend to get more attention because of that than others, all 7 of those angels get offerings, and we have to clean their altar and maintain it and keep it up and keep up with it on a regular basis. So that really helps. Using what you do to serve others is such an important part of this tradition. Now, beyond that, we also have altars here. Oh, well, for instance, I have the altar to my holy guardian angel. That has to be maintained. I also have the altar over here, which you can't see. Not this one behind me, but way in the west over here. I have an altar to my 4 familiar spirits. That's where I work with them. We also have an altar to Bast that sits outside our front door, right next to our Gabriel altar, actually. And it kind of works out because cats are sacred to the moon. So we have Gabriel sitting right there next to Bast. And anything that we do that has to do with cats, that's where we do that work. So, yes, you can have altars to all sorts of different deities around your house in the proper places, just so long as you are willing to maintain them and work them and make and grow with them. And they will, by the way. When you set up an altar, it can be as simple as a shelf with a properly colored cloth, a candle, and a bowl for incense. And then little by little, as your relationship grows and you work that altar more and more, you're going to add things. You're going to find gifts to give to the spirit and set on the altar. You're going to get oils and incenses and lamps and talismans and magical images. And over the years, it'll expand. So make sure you always give your altars room to expand once they've grown, because they start to get real cranky if they feel like they've run out of elbow room. Okay. So that's pretty much the answer to that part, but I don't think I actually finished this. So let me go on with what Michael asked. He says he only has 1 room, and if so, how many could he put in the same room? He says, should I place Archangel Michael in the south as well, so then I can use the same space for my LBRP also? Okay, I'm gonna keep breaking this down. Yes, you can have more than one in the same room. Now, like I said, like we keep certain angels, like Anael and Samael, separate on purpose. We keep Michael and Samael separate on purpose. But there was a time when we didn't have the room to do all this. We lived in a very small house. I did have a temple room, but it was nothing like the size of this place. So it was very small, and I had all the angels in the temple. I didn't just disperse them through the house. But again, I'm going to go back to what I said before. Be aware of their midrashim. Like for instance, if you have shelving set up, make sure you put Michael at the highest place. Don't put Samael above Michael, or Michael's gonna really bitch about that. Okay, and just keep that in mind. Keep in mind where you have them in juxtaposition with each other. If you have 2 entities that don't get along and you can feel that they're really not liking being next to each other, you can move them to opposite sides of the room. So yeah, you can do that. As for how many, it depends on how big your space is and how much time you have to dedicate to actually taking care of all the altars. But that's the same for even if you have a whole house full of altars like we do. Now, as for where he asked about, could he put Michael in the south? Yes. Michael is in some cases the angel of the sun, but in some traditions he's the angel of fire. Some traditions associate fire with the east, like the old grimoires. Some traditions, like the Golden Dawn, Thelema, and Wicca, associate fire with the south. If you're practicing one of those traditions, you can place Michael in the south. You'll just be calling that aspect of him. You'll be calling the fire aspect of him. And if you're doing things like, he says the LBRP, for those who don't know, that's the Lesser Banishing Ritual of the Pentagram. It's a Golden Dawn ritual. Now, if you're using these old altars and all these Solomonic methods to work with the angels, but you're also using Golden Dawn, that's actually fine. And I'm not talking about mixing the traditions, but I mean, like, as he said, having your let's say you have 4 altars. You have Raphael on an eastern altar. You have Michael on a southern altar. You have Gabriel on a western altar. And you have the archangel Oriel, who is the angel of earth. And you have him on a northern altar. performing Golden Dawn rituals in front of those altars like that is not detrimental. There is nothing that you're going to do in Golden Dawn work that will be displeasing, detrimental, or conflicting with Solomonic entities or Solomonic practice. Okay, the Golden Dawn drew most of its correspondences from the Solomonic grimoires, so there's a link there. And I think we're about to run out of memory again, so let me get through this very quickly. Michael asks, can he use the same space to do invocations with a magic circle? Again, as long as it's not something that conflicts with the entities you're working with, like the Golden Dawn, that's fine. And he says he's wanting to be efficient because he has limited space. So yeah, I think that pretty much covers that. You don't want to do something that's going to anger the entity, but there's nothing in the Golden Dawn that's gonna anger one of those four archangels or any of the archangels. So you're fine with that.